What are we discussing on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast? Well, obviously, that 14-run inning that stunned the Colorado Rockies. And to break it down, we got Paul Holden of Locked on Rockies for a little Locked on Diamondbacks, Locked on Rockies crossover.
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? Always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas. I'm a multimedia journalist and I'm a graphic designer. So please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com to see all of my latest work. Oh my God, I can't believe the Dbacks just did that to the Colorado Rockies. I was at the game tonight. I'm still in awe. My hands are still shaking. Fantastic win by the Dbacks on opening day. We'll break down the game with Paul Holden of Locked on Rockies. But first, I want to say thank you for making Locked on Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free. It's available on all platforms. So please continue to tell your friends. And one of those platforms is YouTube. We have hit 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, but now we want to hit 2,000 subscribers by the All-Star break. So please hit subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. Now, before we get into that conversation with Paul Holden of Locked on Rockies, I first want to talk about some Dbacks numbers and franchise records that they set in that third inning, because I just feel like we need to really highlight what the Dbacks did in that third inning because it was truly historic. So here are some numbers and stats I've compiled from Twitter. Was AZ Central and Arizona Sports 98.7. So shout out to those resources for helping me compile all these facts. First one. The third inning spanned 44 minutes of real time, and it felt like it at the game. It felt like the inning was never ending, but in a good way, because every batter went up there, and it was another hit, and it was another merry-go-round around the bases. In the bottom of the third inning, they sent 18 batters to the plate. They recorded 13 hits. They scored 14 runs. All those marks were new franchise highs. They've never had 14 runs in an inning. They've never had 13 hits in an inning, and they've never sent 18 batters in just one inning before tonight. The Dbacks had the most runs scored in an opening day inning since 1900, and they had the fourth most runs ever in an inning, tied for the fourth most runs ever in an inning in this performance tonight. So really, really crazy stuff when you try to put it in that kind of perspective. Like whenever you're like, oh, this thing hasn't been done in over 100 years. It's really insane because of how long the baseball history is. The last team to send 18 batters to the plate in an inning was the Colorado Rockies, who did it back in 2010. The Dbacks in the inning went 13 for 15 with 10 singles, 3 doubles, 2 walks, and a sacrifice fly. Perdomo, Marte, Gurriel, Walker, and Gabriel Moreno all recorded 2 hits in the inning apiece. Can you believe that? Multiple guys got multiple hits in just one inning. Each batter had 2 at-bats in the inning. Like Zach Allen said, I have to agree. I have never seen that before in my life watching baseball. Insane. The 2 Rockies pitchers in that inning left the game. Kyle Freeland, I think he left with a 38.57 ERA, and the other guy left with a 1.62 ERA, Molina. I don't think I've ever seen a 1.62 ERA. I would have to go back and look at what Clayton Kershaw's ERA was last year in the postseason for context. And then final stat, the Rockies needed 59 pitches to get through the inning, third most in D-backs history. Historic inning, historic game for the D-backs. I'm still riding the emotional high from the game. But to help calm me down, we got Paul Holden of Locked On Rockies here. So let's get into the crossover.
Rock on Rockies fans and Diamondbacks fans, welcome into a special crossover episode of Locked On Rockies and Locked On Diamondbacks for the 29th day of March, the day following opening day, the day of reckoning for Rockies fans. And we are your hosts here of Locked On Rockies and Locked On Diamondbacks. I am your host of Locked On Rockies, Paul Holden, joined by Millard Thomas. Literally just got back from the ballpark minutes ago. Millard, I mean, you had a much more fun day than I. But before we dive into all of the game action, I mean, it had to be a really, really exciting opening day, even before what happened in the game there in Arizona.
Yeah, even before the game started. I mean, you could just tell walking into the stadium, there was a different vibe. Of course, it's opening day, so the stadium is usually a little bit more filled on opening day, but this was an absolute packed house by Dbacks fans. I mean, listen, last year was packed, but you were playing the LA Dodgers. I didn't know if you were going to get the same fan base against the Colorado Rockies. No disrespect, Paul, but D-backs fans showed out in a big way, packed house. And I think with the D-backs coming off their World Series postseason run last year, I think it's a new day for this D-backs fan base. And I think we're going to see a lot more crowded games at Chase Field this season.
Yeah, and I think you saw the exciting Diamondbacks players, the ones that you got to know last year during the breakout, but immediately in this game, you see the impact of Gino Suarez. I mean, this game got broken open and blown open, but people will forget and overshadowed before it got out of hand in the third inning. It had the makings of a classic Rockies Diamondbacks back and forth affair. And if it wasn't for really good defense from the Diamondbacks, the Rockies would have tied it up there in the second.
Yeah, because Gallen was definitely looking a little shaky on the mound today. It wasn't his normal self. But like you said, Eugenio Suarez, big upgrade this offseason by the D-backs. They needed to go get someone to play third base after Evan Longoria last year. Immediate upgrade. Suarez, slightly above average defender. We saw it. He snagged that line drive, did the Michael Jordan, jumped in the air, snagged it out the air, and also had himself a good offensive day as well. So great new addition by the D-backs, and so far making an instant impact in this offense and on the defensive end, which is maybe not something everyone expected when he first came over, but so far looking really good in that new Arizona Diamondbacks uniform, might I add.
Well, and the Diamondbacks, of course, making another move at the end of right before the season starts and bringing in another pitcher. I mean, you really can't. I feel like there is a lot of momentum in Arizona, and then it gets started off with a literal bang.
Yeah, I mean, to sign Jordan Montgomery after adding Erod already, of course, both of those guys are going to be out maybe the first few weeks of the season. But if you're going to have a team that can just routinely put up 14-run innings and 16-run games, like, you're probably going to be okay. Obviously, you still need those guys back, and they will come back. But D-backs do have some decent depth behind those guys, and the Tommy Henrys, the Ryan Nelson, the Brandon Pfaadt, like, all those guys have experience with the D-backs the last couple of years. Like, they're not just throwing random rookies out there in the rotation. These are guys who have at least gone through playoff wars, like the Pfaadts and the Ryan Nelsons. Tommy Henry was a pretty solid starter last year before he got hurt. So D-backs have the depth. D-backs have high-end talent for the first time in a while, and we saw it on full display tonight because, Paul, I don't know if you're ready, but is it time to talk about that inning?
Yeah, it's time. And, from the Rockies' perspective here, it was literally the worst night. Like, not only was it what happened, but how it started happening. It was, I was really buying into the increased velocity of Kyle Freeland, but unfortunately we saw the issues that have plagued Kyle Freeland's career. The pitches don't have enough movement, and they were just laid out in the middle of the zone. I mean, it's one thing when you're, when I can't remember if this was, I think it was still when it was like a 6-1 ball game. I can't remember who it was, fights it off his hands, and it's a little blooper right on the right field line, versus the rest of the hits were lined up, solid, great contact. I mean, it wasn't like he was getting dinked and dunked. The Diamondbacks were demolishing every single pitch. And it's hard because you want to sit and say, oh, it's the beginning. You want to, it's the first game of the season. It's this and it's that. But for the Rockies to follow up their worst season in franchise history with the worst opening day, with the worst inning, with a slow, an offseason that was highly criticized by people. I wasn't as critical because I knew that the season was going to be tough and they were going with things, but every single issue people have with the Colorado Rockies was on full display tonight.
Yeah.
Whether it be from the team not announcing the cable streaming network until hours before opening day, to what happened. I mean, that's your number one, Kyle Freeland. That's your number one in your rotation. And I am a Kyle Freeland guy. He is a better pitcher than what he showed tonight, but he has these nights where he gets blown up. He's not going to I don't think he'll get blown up to the tune of 10 runs on 10 hits that frequently, but every issue, everything that people doubt about the Rockies, we saw tonight.
Mm-hmm. And we know Kyle Freeland's not number one starter. Like, that's probably the Rockies' biggest weakness right now is that rotation, because like I've said to you on this podcast in our little roundtable preview, like, I like their lineup. Like, if before the game got out of hand, like, if it was a close game, like, I think the Rockies would have kept pace with the Dbacks throughout the game. I think because of the third inning, maybe, the mentality of the hitters gets dinged a little bit. But I still like that Rockies lineup. I still think they have pretty good depth. I drafted Nolan Jones on a team this year. Like, I still think they have some high-end talent as well. It's going to be the pitching that holds back this Rockies team, because as we saw in that third inning, even after you took out the Kyle Freelands of the world, like, it didn't get much better when the relievers came in for the Rockies.
Yeah, that reliever making his MLB debut, I'm blanking on the name. It's late, and honestly, I want to forget about everything that happened in that game. But it's you can look at a small silver lining. The rest of the bullpen comes in. Victor Vodnik and Jalen Beeks come in the end of the game and hold the D-backs scoreless. I mean, there was not much that happened in that ball game after the third inning. I mean, not surprising, but if you're looking for small things, you can point and say those guys had a good night. Ryan McMahon had some decent at bats tonight, but you nail it on the head. The Rockies lineup is more interesting, and again, it started off really a Brendan Rodgers double with Ryan McMahon scoring on a double right there. I mean, there was definitely some moments where the Rockies could have built momentum, but if the pitching staff is going to set you that far back, because this ain't going to be the last time that this happens. I don't think this level happens, but the bad inning happens. We see this happen with the Rockies time and time again. So now, if you're the Rockies, you have to come back and you got to show something tomorrow. You have to respond and it starts with a guy that you're turning to, one of your new guys in Cal Quantrill. But the Rockies can only go as far as their starters, and going less than 3 innings and giving up 10 runs on 10 hits ain't going to get it done.
No, because that D-backs third inning, guys, I mean, I don't know if there was anything. I didn't know why Kyle Freeland stayed in so long. I mean, after like 7 straight runs or whatever given up in that inning, you thought he would have been taken out. But D-backs did absolutely. I mean, I was in absolute awe watching that inning in the stadium, because it was like, man, another hit, and then another hit, and then another hit. Saw the lineup go through twice. Like, if Alek Thomas, that last at bat, was able to get up again, like Perdomo, 3 at bats in 1 inning. Like, it's something I've never seen. Multiple players getting multiple hits in that inning. Every D-backs player had multiple hits except for Corbin Carroll, who did go 0 on the night. So if you need even more positivity as a D-backs fan, like, you put up 16 runs on the night. You had 18 hits, and Corbin Carroll delivered 0 of those hits for you tonight. The offense was tremendous. Suarez, the new addition, was good. Lourdes Gurriel, re-signed him, brought him back. He had 5 RBIs. I think that was a D-backs franchise record for opening day. And then the rookie, Blaze Alexander, who made his debut today, was able to deliver the 14th run, the franchise record for runs in an inning, on his first big league hit. Franchise records all over for the D-backs, positive vibes all over. I'm hoping that third inning, Paul, killed the Rocky spirits the rest of this series, but we'll see. I know even though the Rockies are not typically a good team, these matchups between the D-backs and Rockies are always competitive despite whatever the record is.
Well, in the Rockies, even in their beginning of the season intro video, it's about proving the doubters wrong in ways this season. So You have to respond. And we'll talk about how the Rockies can respond and how the rest of this series will look and what this means for the Diamondbacks going forward here. Coming up in segment number 2 of today's episode of Locked On Rockies and Locked On Diamondbacks. We will do that in just a moment. But before we do that, got to tell you about the folks that help make this show possible, and that includes FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets. And boy, Millard, I don't know how much you followed the basketball that was happening during this demolition on opening day, but there are certainly to be some brackets busted after some of the upsets we saw. Well, FanDuel's got you covered because you can bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all, or if you want to get in on some of the action with the Rockies and the Diamondbacks here tomorrow. $200 to use on those with bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins at FanDuel.com/locked on. That's FanDuel.com/locked on. You can bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. This is Locked On Rockies and Locked On Diamondbacks. I'm one of your hosts, Paul Holden, here, thanking you for making us your first listen of the day. Millard, what was your favorite moment? I mean, we got to get goofy with it because it was literally baseball ridiculousness in that third inning. We broke down some of the X's and O's, but give me just some of the goofiness. Give me some of the reaction around where you were sitting in the crowd or who you were with at the game. I mean, it's a moment you probably won't see ever again.
Yeah, I mean, the crowd were just going bananas because we just couldn't believe it just kept happening, because the craziest part about it was there was no home runs in that inning. Like, it was truly singles, doubles, and just drawing walks and just having good plate discipline. And then it was like, is this ride ever going to end? Because it was like, what, 8-9 runs before the Rockies even recorded an out in that inning. Like, it just felt like that inning was never going to end. It was like around 35 minutes in length. It felt a lot longer than that. I was like, is Zach Gallen even going to be able to come back in this game? Like, he's sitting so long over there on the bench. I didn't even know if it was going to be possible. But being in the stadium, I mean, super grateful. I think the favorite moment by most fans was probably that Blaze Alexander, the one that delivered a 14th run, because for him to deliver the hit that set the franchise record and it for it to be his first big league hit, someone that absolutely tore apart spring training, 400 average, his slash line was amazing. He was the best player for the D-backs in spring training. To see him get to the regular season and continue the hot streak and deliver in his first game, great stuff by him. And also Ketel Marte. I mean, it was fun to see. He was good all postseason, all spring training, and then he just comes out, continues 3 straight singles to start his 2024 season. I mean, good vibes all around. Literally every player outside Corbin Carroll had at least 2 hits in this game. So you could really nitpick and parse different elements of what your favorite moment of this game was, because no matter who your favorite player was, they probably had a pretty cool moment in this game against the Rockies.
What do you think this means? I know it's game 1. We're over, we're overreacting. Of course, Rockies fans, it's over. It's done. The ship, it's throw in the towel. The season's done. But I mean, like you mentioned, everything that the Diamondbacks, as a fan, you have to sit there and be happy with. Not every team responds to a World Series trip with aggressive postseason and really diving into building on stuff, mixed with a team that, like you mentioned, already looks like they are vibing. I mean, it looks like the team that just finished. It really looks like they just came out the dugout after shaking off the World Series loss not that long ago. So what do you think this means for the Diamondbacks' big picture? Can you take something from that this early?
Yeah, I think this game definitely showed, because entering the season, the D-backs have their own doubters, right? They're coming off a season where people felt like their run was kind of fluky. Entered the postseason, 84 wins, negative run differential. It's like, how did you make it to the World Series? So they had something to prove themselves entering this season. So coming off a World Series run, they were even more hungry to prove themselves. I think this game showed you that this team has a higher ceiling. Of course, again, no disrespect to the Rockies. You're not going to get 16 runs every time. You're not always going to face an opponent like this. But I think they went out there and at least showed you they are hungry. Last year wasn't a fluke. We did add new additions. Suarez is going to be an upgrade at third. Blaze Alexander can be an injection of youth, and we don't even have the rest of our rotation yet. We haven't even seen the Monties. We haven't seen the Erods, and we also didn't even see our DHs yet, the Randall Gritchicks, who you're familiar with, and the Jock Petersons of the world. So this D-backs team, really good vibes after game one, and it's not even the complete team yet. Paul Sewald is out. Like, this team is only going to get better, and I think what they showed you from game one, they're taking this season seriously from the jump. They're not resting on their laurels from last year. They're not just riding last year's cool run. It's like, oh, good vibes. They're still a young team on the rise. No, they have real expectations now. They are the hunted, not just the hunters. And I think for this team, that mentality, having that mentality entering the season, I think we got to see a glimpse of that in game one.
Yeah, and it's what you want to see as not only on the first game, but the culmination of this offseason. And when you kind of can look at it and be like, when it works, that's how good it can be. And again, you can put every grain of salt you want with the Rockies in this, but that looked like a team that was that looked prepared to go out there swinging, that looked prepared to go out there and we're going to be aggressive. And you mentioned it as well. It was all on hard hit singles and doubles in that inning. That's not, I mean, one home run in that game, just the one in the first inning there. That's really incredible when you think about it. And the Rockies got 4 hits in that game, you know, compared to that.
Yeah.
If you can be that good at plate discipline, at just really good basic hitting, that is, I think, just such an amazing foundational piece you have. And it was really interesting to hear. I couldn't hear exactly all the specifics that Ryan Spielbergs was saying on the broadcast, but he was saying how the D-backs have constructed a roster that really plays to their home ballpark. Mm-hmm. They have really constructed a roster that really, uses the benefits. And it's something I beg the Rockies to do. Do you think that that's true? Do you think the Diamondbacks have constructed a team that kind of fits their home ballpark? And do you think that that's going to be something that will really benefit them in the future?
I think they definitely did to a degree. Like, I think this lineup is just overall really well balanced. Like, you got lefty, like you can literally go like righty lefty combination with every guy if you want. You got the speedsters and the Perdomos, the Carrolls, the McCarthys, the Thomases. You got your power guys and the Suarezes, the Jocks, the Walkers. So from a lineup construction, like, I think it's the kind of lineup that could honestly fit in any ballpark. This Chase Field, it's not like it's Yankee Stadium where it's like, okay, we know right field. That thing is like a little league ballpark. Let's get a bunch of lefties. Like, they definitely had the ballpark in mind when building this construction of the lineup. But I think overall, they just want to be well balanced. We knew we needed more power to this lineup. We did great from a speed department, manufacturing runs last year, but this year we want to add that, change the game with one swing of the bat factor. And that's what they were able to add in the Suarezes of the world and the Jocks of the world. So super excited to see what the full complement of this lineup can do, because I think Jock Peterson, once he gets going, he's going to be an instant fan favorite. And I'm super excited what a healthy Randall Gritchick could look like as well, because he's been a guy that's been pretty solid for the last few years, as you know, as a Colorado Rockies guy.
Well, and familiar with Arizona as well, playing a couple of years with Colorado. I mean, really, Randall Gritchick was a fine utility bench player to have, just didn't fit in the equation. And at the time, made sense. Flip them and get some arms and prospects there for the Rockies. Just to kind of circle back, with the Rockies can't get swept. I mean, I just feel like if you really want to salvage this, you got to come out with a pulse tomorrow, because what the Rockies have to prove that they can do this year is to bounce back from the hardship, bounce back from the hard times. So often we've seen the Rockies go on really tough stretches, losing 8 of 9 or, close to double-digit games and really just sink. And they don't have time to waste. They can get sunk real fast. They don't play a single team that finished the season under 500 until the beginning of May. So, I mean, the Rockies are only playing great talent or playoff level talent throughout the beginning part of the season. So if the Rockies can bounce back from this and learn from it, it's a great growing moment. But man, I can't sit here and say that I necessarily feel overly confident. It's hard not to feel a little bit like a buffoon after how much I gassed up some of the parts of this team, and then that happens. I know baseball's weird, but man, it's just really tough to really find the words to figure out where to go from here, because at this moment, there's so many things about the Rockies where it has to be like, you have to show me, you have to impress me, you have to prove it. I just wonder what Dick Monfort is thinking right now.
Yeah, I would say D-backs have a great chance in game number 2 with Merrill Kelly on the mound, but game 3 and game 4, I mean, Brandon Pfaadt, he had a good postseason, but those regular season issues that could creep back in. Maybe the home run problem persists into the regular season to start the year, and then it's going to be, I think, Tommy Henry in that game 4 as well. Like, he's coming off an injury. He was a little bit shaky up and down throughout spring training. So I think the D-backs take the first 2 games for sure, but games 3 and game 4, I think, are definitely toss up wild cards. And if that Rockies lineup can get a little bit going, like, they can definitely, with some of the talent that they have, some of the athletes that they have, again, Nolan Jones, I mean, I'm predicting a monster season for that guy, mostly because I have him on a couple fantasy teams. So I still really like that Rockies lineup. And against the Pfaadts and the Tommy Henrys of the world, I wouldn't be surprised if they got going against those guys.
And I want to talk a little bit about how the Rockies did get a little unlucky in this game, and also want to talk a little bit about the officiating. I don't want to dwell on it, and I know it's game 1, but there was some questionable stuff there on both sides. It certainly didn't drastically change the game, but we'll talk a little bit about that coming up in segment number 3 of today's episode of Locked On Rockies and Locked On Diamondbacks. This is the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team every day. And if your team is the Colorado Rockies or the Arizona Diamondbacks, you are in the right spot, because that's what we do. We talk Rockies, we talk Diamondbacks each and every day. And are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day, and you have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Well, you can make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And, Millard, we're breaking down this game. Obviously, the Diamondbacks embarrassed the Rockies. It was, a drubbing of all things. But the Rockies did get a little bit unlucky, especially Eleris Montero, who really hit the screws off a couple of balls. But we talked about Gino with the jumping grab, and then another great catch there in center field there by Arizona. The Rockies just couldn't find the holes where Arizona was. And if you're a Rockies fan, you got to remind yourself that it's going to happen one day where there's going to be, it's going to happen. But you're a little deflated by the fact that, man, Zach Gallen was a little off. You can only muster about 4 hits in that game. I know that inning takes out so much. I mean, as much as it drains Zach Gallen, it also drains any sort of offensive momentum that the Rockies have. But that's a problem. I mean, hitting on the road is an issue for the Rockies. So if you're hopefully the Rockies can show some life, but you mentioned it doesn't get any easier. And this Diamondbacks rotation is a good one. How do you think that this rotation compares when fully healthy to, say, the Padres and the Giants? I mean, you could go the Dodgers too. Why not? But I know you like taking shots at the King.
Oh, yeah, we will. Do want to give respect, though, because I do feel like the Rockies defense did play well in that game. Despite all the runs, I don't think it was the defense's fault. Like you said, it was just straight line drives where there was nobody. Like, when the Rockies had chances, like there was a Charlie Blackmon catch at the wall late in that game. I was like, how is this man 40 years old and still tracking down balls?
I think that was Jake Cave. Was
that Jake Cave?
Yeah.
Okay, I was like, I saw all the gray in the beard. I was like, I just assumed it was
a big bearded guy that plays right field for the Rockies. And
then there was like another Marte in like the next inning where there was like a little diving stop by the second baseman throughout Marte. So I thought there was good defensive plays by the Rockies in that game. So I think your defense is going to be solid for this year. But to answer your question about the rotation, not only do I believe the D-backs have the best rotation now in the NL West after adding Jordan Montgomery. I mean, they have legit 4 starters that would be number 2 to number 3s in every rotation, and Zach Gallen is an ace in every staff. But not only do they have the best rotation in the NL West, they have an argument for the best rotation in Major League Baseball. If you look at like a MLB.com top 10 rotation ranking, like they either have like the Mariners or Braves as number one or number two. And it's like, would I rather have Erod and Montgomery or Chris Sale and Charlie Morton? Like, I'm probably going Erod and Monty. Would I rather have Logan Gilbert and Bryce Miller or Erod and Montgomery? Like, I'll probably lean the D-backs in that argument too. I just feel like when you look at the number 3 and number 4 for the D-backs and compare it against the rest of Major League Baseball, like, I don't know who's throwing out that level of ceiling. Like, entering a postseason matchup where either Erod or Montgomery, probably Erod, is your number 4 starter, and then Fott could be your number 5, who's going to be a long reliever. Like, Fott stepped up in a big way last year as the D-backs number 3, and now he might not even start when you get to the postseason. I think the depth of that D-backs rotation and the ceiling of the D-backs rotation is as high as maybe any rotation that they've ever had in their franchise history. I think they have a real argument to be the best rotation in Major League Baseball right now.
Man, I love it. I mean, you know, as much as it stings, as much as it's a bummer, if I'm gonna root for a team, I like it when I've liked what the Diamondbacks did last year, and I liked what they've built off because they've embraced this modern game of baseball. They have really just they've really stuck to their approach. They bought into their approach. They bought into their rebuild. They bought into what they were doing. And then when the window opened a little bit early, they bought in even further. And I think that just matters so much. And you know, the Rockies at this point, there simply is nothing else to do but try to respond, try to do something, try to build. You just got to there's 161 more opportunities for the Rockies to go out there and improve on this one.
Yeah, and on your D-backs point, like they're kind of doing it like the old school way, like we saw in this game. Like they're not doing the Yankees, Bronx Bombers. Let's hit 5 home runs. Like that's how baseball was kind of, you know, tracking the last few years, right? The 3 true outcomes, home runs, strikes, and walks. Like the D-backs have changed that. Like they like walks, they don't want to strike out, and they just want to get on base and create havoc. And that's what they did in this game. That's what they did all of last season. And now if they get that little bit of power infusion from their new additions, I think the offensive ceiling can only go that much higher for the D-backs in 2024.
Well, and the D-backs can be more successful because they're breaking the 3 true outcomes, because the 3 true outcomes never made sense as the best version of baseball or the most successful team or the best team. It just was that those eras of baseball and where baseball was trending that it made them and the skill level. But the Diamondbacks have shown that you can do that. You can do your style. You can go with that and make some noise. And like you said, they didn't win the division, but they made the playoffs. And then when it mattered most, they did what they could up until the World Series, of course. But there's just a lot of things to be jealous of as a Rockies fan, because this is a Diamondbacks team that was bad. That was very bad not that long ago.
Yeah, we were right there, neck and neck, 2021.
Right, exactly. And it's a team that took a short rebuild, but really embraced it. And look at where they're at, and look at and just every time I've talked to you, Miller, that since the end of last season, the ceiling has just gone up for the D-backs, the moves that they've made. Whereas the Rockies, I keep looking at things and keep looking at reasons to say that their ceiling is going higher. But then you get these reality checks. You get these games where you're reminded that look at how far the Diamondbacks have left the Rockies in the dust. And I'll let you, I don't know if you have anything to close on that, but that's just kind of where I was going to wrap it up is what we learned from opening day was that the Diamondbacks are so far ahead of the Rockies, and they did it in a and they 2 teams with similar timelines. The Diamondbacks have shown what they're doing makes more sense and is working, whereas the Rockies continue to flail.
Yeah, and some of it's just luck, right? Like Merrill Kelly coming over from Korea and turning into like a legit number 2 starter. Like no one would have expected that. Christian Walker was a backup to Chris Davis for years in Baltimore. Him now being a 30 home run, best defensive first baseman in the league. Like no one could have expected that. And then you made some smart gambles, trading away an up and coming outfielder in Dalton Varsho, arguably the best defensive outfielder in baseball, getting back Gabriel Moreno, Lourdes Gurriel, two players who are now starting for you every day, made major contributions in this game and all of last year. So it's a confluence of things. You got to be smart and take your risks, but you also just have to get lucky sometimes with some of this stuff. So for the Rockies, I mean, maybe, not letting Trevor Story just walk, or better Nolan Arenado, stuff we've already talked about, we know. So for the Rockies, I mean, you could try to take a page out the D-backs book, but I think at the end of the day, you just have to find your own philosophy and figure out what works for you, because I think that's what the D-backs did. They figure out their own way. They didn't follow the model of the Yankees or the Astros. I think they found their own niche of how they want to build their team. I think the Rockies just have to find their own path of how do you want to build this? Obviously, guys like Nolan Jones and Tovar are maybe your core pieces. How do we, what are the kind of players that we want to put around and complement those guys moving forward?
Yep. Identity crisis has been a problem for the Rockies just about their entire existence, with a couple of exceptions of a couple of years here and there. Millard, a fun night at the ballpark for you, an agonizing night on the couch watching for me. Where can they go to make sure they're staying up to date with all things you and all things Diamondbacks this season?
Yeah, please check out Locked on Diamondbacks on both Twitter and Instagram and wherever you stream your podcast. Please subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. Just dropped a one-on-one with Zach Gallen, the D-back star pitcher. So go check that out, please.
Yeah, there you go. One-on-one. I mean, he's talking to Zach freaking Gallen, folks. How are you not going to go check that out? You can check out all your Rockies action, Locked on Rockies there. We just finished up a week where we talked to different Rockies media members for a week straight, getting their previews. Some more optimistic than others, but it was on full display, the concerns with the Rockies. But the Diamondbacks demolish, embarrass, and bamboozle the Colorado Rockies on opening day. We'll see how it goes here with game number 2 coming way on Friday. And Millard will be breaking down all things Diamondbacks. I'll be breaking down all things Colorado Rockies. Until next time, this has been the Locked On Podcast Network.